Pomej. The Ghost Ship. Sherlock Holmes, The Galactic Cases. Episode 14. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Go Audio production. Captain Decker had never experienced anything like this before, a ghost ship in the middle of space, and one whose name he had never heard of. Through the front window, the Enola Gatwick appeared smaller than the Ultimo one, yet still as substantial as an ancient nuclear-powered submarine. As protocol dictated in such rare cases, Decker had immediately attempted to establish contact, to no avail. Now uncertainty prevailed. The ship's computer failed to respond on any of the widely known communication frequencies. Only a faint static could be heard if one listened intently. The robot Elmer had to cross over using piggyback rockets to determine whether the crew was still alive in deep sleep or already dead. On the bridge, Decker and First Officer Tornot monitored his entry into the apparently abandoned ship, which was shrouded in complete darkness. "Can you hear me, sir?" the robot confirmed. "Yes, try to shed some light on the matter, Elmer, and not just figuratively," the captain urged him. "Look at this, Tornot. A ship like this hasn't been built for at least 30 years. "But it still has power," Tornot pointed out, indicating the glowing engines. "Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to maintain its position and would slowly drift through space, like a derelict frigate at sea. Very peculiar." "The position is also very peculiar," Decker noticed. "Just before a quantum tunnel, almost as if it wanted to thwart our flight through." At that moment, Holmes and Dr. Watson entered the bridge. "What new discoveries await us?" inquired Holmes, who had not solved a murder case in quite some time. "It has been a long while since a case has led us beyond the borders of a foreign planet." "I say, what sort of gloomy construction is that?" inquired Dr. Watson, pointing at the front window through which he could see the spacecraft with its lifeless portholes and brilliantly white glowing engine nozzles, which nevertheless remained motionless. "A ghost ship that has been missing for 25 years, Decker enlightened him, staring intently at a large monitor from his command chair. "My research revealed the disappearance of the Enola Gatwick without any prior distress signal, and now the ship, long thought lost, appears to be waiting here for its rescue. There, on the screen, we can see inside through our main robot's eyes. Elmer has found the light switch." Indeed, at first, the light merely flickered like a broken fluorescent tube, yet afforded a clear view of a narrow corridor, which was marred by various objects strewn across the floor. "At least, the artificial gravity is still working," Decker noted. "Otherwise, all the items lying on the floor would be floating about in the air. Speaking of air, Elmer, is the atmosphere aboard even still breathable for humans?" "Yes, sir. The oxygen has precisely the right consistency for human lungs," the robot described eagerly. Finally, the flickering of the light ceased, stabilizing at a luminosity of 300 lux, and a quiet sound emerged, similar to a chord playing in an endless loop. "This place needs a proper cleaning," Elmer stated matter-of-factly, and moved along the corridor. His height of 2 meters nearly made him bump into the ceiling. "I am receiving vital signs from at least one human and am attempting to locate them." "Could anyone still be alive on a ghost ship?" inquired Holmes. "I once read in the Times about a Royal Navy vessel that drifted around the Atlantic for 20 years without a crew. No trace of them, neither skeletons nor pests like rats and mice, no missing lifeboats. All life, whether young or old, seemed to have thrown itself from the proud vessel into the sea." According to the documents I found about the old spaceship, everyone on board was over 30. After 25 years, they would have aged accordingly, unless they put themselves into cryogenic sleep," Decker informed the curious detective. "The ship's computer is booting up," reported Elmer, whose camera eyes captured the bright screen with its seemingly endless green sequence of numbers in a small room, allowing Decker, Tornott, Dr. Watson and Holmes to see it clearly from the bridge of the Ultimo 1. "All data from the ship's computer has been deleted," Elmer announced. "I am attempting to reconstruct as much as possible." "Later, Elmer," Decker instructed him. "Search for survivors first." "Shouldn't I search for potentially hidden intact files?" he persisted. "No," Decker brusquely objected. "Later. First continue searching for the source of the vital signs." Obediently, Elmer turned away from the computer monitor and walked confidently along the corridor. He had to step over tools, weapons, dishes, provisions, torn cables, and indefinable rubbish lying on the floor. There were even some already sprouting potatoes amongst it all. "Do you see that, Mr. Decker?" Holmes made certain. "The fact that the potatoes are sprouting there shows us that there must be a temperature on board this ship that is pleasant for humans as well." "Yes, you are quite right," Decker agreed. "But that does not mean that anyone is still in the best of health." Suddenly, the robot stood before a closed fire door, pressing a red button on the side several times, which yielded no success. "We cannot proceed here, sir. This bulkhead blocking my path through the ship is rusted shut." "It has rusted?" Tornott repeated in disbelief. "Impossible. It would have needed to become damp, which contradicts the sterile conditions aboard." "On ships at sea, bulkheads are sealed as soon as salt water enters," Holmes explained. "Mr. Holmes, there is no water in liquid form in space," Tornott lectured him, "which could penetrate the ship." "But there is liquid water aboard, like here in a swimming pool," Holmes countered with a raised index finger. "Not on ships this old," Decker explained to him, shaking his head. "Swimming pools like ours have only been installed for crew relaxation on long-haul flights for about 15 years. "And what about the drinking water pipes?" Dr. Watson inquired. "If one of those pipes has sprung a leak, then this water could have easily found its way from the pipes into the ship's interior." Holmes completed the sentence. "Isn't that right?" "That would indeed be rather harmful to the computer electronics of this old heap," Tornott conceded. "Shall I try to open the hatch, sir?" Elmer asked for permission. "Wait! First close the hatch behind you, in case a burst pipe has caused flooding," Decker instructed him. Obediently, the robot turned around and closed the metal sliding door behind him with the push of a button, which locked into place with a quiet squeak before he picked up a laser gun lying on the floor to burn away the rust. The sound of the endless cord rang incessantly through the speakers across the ghost ship, almost like an Aeolian harp melody through the robot's speech module all the way to the Ultimo 1. "What a dreadful sequence of notes," Tornott complained. "If I have to listen to it any longer, I'll develop tinnitus." "Won't Elmer's electronics be damaged by sudden wetness, Mr. Decker?" Holmes worried. "No," the captain reassured him. "He is waterproof up to 5,000 meters and fireproof up to 5,000 degrees. "How practical," remarked the doctor. "And what a shame we cannot say the same about our bodies." "We could claim that," Tornott chimed in once again with humorous intent. "But it wouldn't be true." "What task did Enola Gatwick have?" Holmes wanted to know. "The journey to M31, the Andromeda Galaxy," Decker explained. "Quite a lengthy journey for the technology of that time, which is why the disappearance of the ship did not cause much surprise and there was no search mission." "Do you think it was a suicide mission?" inquired Dr. Watson. "Well, that's what I would call it from today's perspective, but back then..." The captain was interrupted by a message from the robot. "All done, sir," Elmer announced his success with the derusting. "I shall now open the hatch." No sooner had he pressed the red button on the side than the heavy hatch swung upwards and a surge of water swept the diligent robot against the rear, closed hatch, producing a loud clunk sound. "Ouch!" said Dr. Watson on behalf of Elmer, who could not feel any pain. He quickly stood up again and was standing waist-deep in the water. "Nothing happened. I think it's best to drain the water through the waste chute to the outside." Now Decker shifted his gaze from the monitor back through the front window, where he could see the water immediately evaporating in a frozen state from a small opening in the ghost ship. "Now I shall continue my exploration," Elmer commented on his movement through the now cleared section of the corridor. "There are no more objects lying about on the floor here, and I shall open the next hatch." "Have all the items on the floor been swept out into space now?" inquired Dr. Watson. "No, there is still a filter in the waste chute," explained Tornot. "All useful items have been caught." "Ah, speaking of useful, why were there no ladies aboard?" The doctor posed a natural question. Should there not have been 2 different specimens of each species for such a long journey, just like in Noah's Ark? "That was not noted in the records," Decker admitted. "So I can only assume that simply no ladies volunteered for this mission." On the screen, something was happening that once again drew his full attention. By now, Elmer had entered a room that must have once served as a canteen, as an empty bottle was rolling back and forth on a large table, as if the ghost ship were experiencing heavy seas. "Look, sir, this bottle appears to have been set in motion recently," the robot speculated. "Because the ship is completely still and the water was not here. It was only in the area between 2 bulkheads that I have already passed." "Yes, we can all see it," Decker informed Elmer. "Can you locate the vital signs?" "They must be further back on board. Here in this room, my sensors detect the smell of human blood," reported Elmer, bent down and revealed a horrific sight. "Good heavens!" exclaimed Dr. Watson, gesturing agitatedly at the screen. "That's a male corpse." "The poor man's throat was cut," observed the robot, eyeing the pale body clad in a light grey, blood-stained uniform. "At least 5 litres of his blood have spread around him." "Press further into the interior of the ill-fated ship," Decker ordered him impatiently. "I fear you will find more dead." A few minutes later, after Elmer had left the canteen, he found another man's corpse in a bunk, whose naked upper body was hanging halfway out of his berth. A narrow black belt was tied around his neck. "This man was clearly strangled," stated Dr. Watson. "While I do not usually make remote diagnoses, his protruding tongue and the blue discoloration around his neck beneath the belt unquestionably indicate his agonizing manner of death. Someone appears to have given themselves over to their murderous desires without restraint," muttered Holmes. "I only know this sort of thing from B-grade horror films," Tornot interjected with his impression. "Now all that's missing is an alien monster with a tubular balloon head and sharp shark teeth." "Carry on, Elmer," commanded Decker, who slumped slightly in his command chair. "I fear today has already been spoilt for me until the day after tomorrow." After a few long strides, the robot reached a sort of prison. Behind a barred door lay the next corpse, again male, in white underpants, his face turned towards the wall. Elmer bent 2 bars apart, reached through, and turned the dead man's head towards himself. His face appeared to have been massaged with a chain. The imprints of blood-red welts across the entire facial skull made the blood freeze in the veins of those watching on the bridge of the Ultimo One. "Well, I'm glad I'm not in Elmer's position over there," Tornot blurted out. "That was clearly the work of a madman." Could it be possible," pondered Holmes aloud whilst rubbing his chin, "that this man was imprisoned here as punishment for the murders of the 2 other men, and was physically punished quite draconianly? Or did the actual murderer simply arrange him in this cell in case he was found alive?" "That's what I like about you, Mr. Holmes," Decker praised him. "You always keep at least 2 options open." "I am just ahead of the one emitting the vital signs." Elmer prepared his observers for his next step. And indeed, behind the prison, he reached a cargo hold where several transport crates of varying sizes were stacked, in the middle of which stood an ice block converted into a coffin. Inside, one could make out a man in a dark uniform. Approximately 1 meter and 80 centimeters tall, he lay as if sleeping on his back, arms crossed over his chest like an Egyptian mummy. At that moment, the penetrating tone aboard the death ship fell silent, and an eerie stillness set in. "Ah, as a child, I was told the fairy tale of Snow White," Tornot recalled inappropriately, for with this statement he destroyed the reverent silence upon discovering the ice block that had been carved into a coffin. "Tornot, only statements relevant to the situation," the captain sternly admonished him. With one of his metal hands, Elmer felt the ice. "This isn't water, but cryogenic fluid. Someone was frozen here for resurrection, sir." "But that contradicts the sprouting potatoes," Holmes immediately noticed. "Indeed, either it must be pleasantly warm or freezing cold over there," Decker speculated. "Elmer, what temperature do your sensors measure on board?" "Exactly 19 degrees Celsius, sir," replied the robot. "However, the cooling fluid from the cold sarcophagus is already melting. This suggests it was colder before I entered." "But then, the water between the bulkheads must have been frozen as well and could hardly have thawed in such a short time," Holmes noticed. "Right," said Tornot. "Something doesn't add up." "Elmer, get him to the exit hatch as quickly as possible and push him outside," ordered the captain. "We'll grab him whilst you search the ship's computer for any remaining files." "But what if he's carrying an infectious disease?" warned Dr. Watson. "Then our medical robot will find that out in record time and isolate him," Tornot reassured him. The captain rose swiftly and hurried to the lift. "Tornot, take charge here. I shall personally catch the coffin with the grippers from the cargo room." "Very well, sir," Tornot said with delight, and immediately took his place in the command chair, which he had long wished to occupy, although such a promotion was not yet up for discussion. "You can rely on me completely, sir." Holmes and Dr. Watson accompanied the captain down to the cargo room, where they were permitted to watch as he operated the practical, extendable gripping arms of the Ultimo One from a touchpad. In less than a quarter of an hour, the melting coffin stood before them. "This ice-cold coffin gives me goosebumps," confessed the doctor. From a casing at the back of the cargo room, a robot emerged with a white chest bearing a red cross. "Medical robot Esculapius 1 reporting for duty." "Very good," Decker said with delight. "Soon we shall know what is going on with this ice-cold fellow." Esculapius 1 extended a drill from his right index finger, with which he could penetrate the remaining ice. The body has a minimal hypothermia of 33 degrees. The warming process will therefore take 3 hours. "Strange. I don't know of any case where someone was frozen for so long yet still maintained a body temperature of 33 degrees, marvelled the captain. "Perhaps he hasn't been in the ice block for very long," Dr. Watson surmised. "That contradicts the lengthy disappearance of the ship," Holmes concluded. "Indeed, several things appear mysterious here," Decker noted. "Esculapius 1, take the patient to our ship's doctor, Dr. Z, who should notify me as soon as he is responsive. And you, Dr. Watson, are welcome to assist him." "Yes, sir." Esculapius 1 quickly pushed the man in the ice block out of the cargo room, followed by Dr. Watson, who was naturally very interested in this case professionally. "This ship," Holmes pondered, "could it have been sent to us as a warning of something? And from whom?" Decker's eyebrows shot up to his blonde hairline. "That remains to be discovered. Do you believe in something like Providence?" Holmes asked him. "Not really. In any case, Providence has never surprised me with a warning." Meanwhile, Elmer had to accept a bitter disappointment aboard the ghost ship. The computer, which had only just booted up, crashed before his eyes. On the dark monitor, only a white line pulsed rhythmically, similar to a heartbeat line on a vital signs monitor in hospital. Now you've killed the ship's computer with your negative aura, Elmer. I most reluctantly contradict you, sir, but it rather appears to be the case that the technology has been damaged after prolonged ineffectiveness. It could also be due to the high humidity present here. My hygrometer is reporting a level of 68%. Well, I wouldn't recommend opening the windows for ventilation in this case, Tornot mocked. You could look for a heater. At the word heater, the computer suddenly booted up again, and just as before, green rows of numbers cascaded across the screen in a seemingly endless sequence. Sir, these number sequences make absolutely no sense at all, Elmer realised. Oh yes, you just cannot see it yet, hehehe, the first officer mocked him. Decker, who entered the bridge with Holmes at that moment and wanted to take his rightful place in the command chair again, put an end to the fun. What happened during my absence? Nothing significant, sir. Just a small hiccup from the old computer. Tornot downplayed the computer crash and jumped up, along with our good Elmer's bewilderment at the running sequences of digits. Sir, I have a suspicion, reported Elmer. This matrix appears to refer to an entirely different ship. What is that supposed to mean? Decker probed harshly. According to the numbers, this ship would have to be enormously large and of much greater weight. With several tentative attempts at typing on the keyboard, Elmer tried to gain access to the ship's computer, but was denied. Could it be possible for a computer to be afflicted with delusions of grandeur? Holmes posed an absurd-sounding question. No, Mr. Holmes, Decker shook his head vigorously. That simply cannot happen. However, what can occur is that the person who programmed it suffers from that condition. With machine-like precision and tireless perseverance, Elmer continued typing on the keys, and after some time, the green number sequences disappeared and made way for several black tiles that spread across the bright screen like a mosaic. There you go, Tornot rejoiced. With patience and plenty of time, one gets closer to the impossible, or however that old saying goes. Hehehe. Before Decker could call him to order, Dr. Z rushed onto the bridge in his billowing white coat, visibly excited and gesticulating with both hands. I have never encountered anything like this before. Just imagine, Captain, the ice-cooled man has warmed back up to a normal body temperature of 36.5 degrees after barely an hour. However, he's staring blankly into space without speaking. Yet his EEG is also normal. Only his reflexes are slightly diminished. It must therefore be psychological, certainly shock. We could set our blonde beauty from accounting, the saucy lure on him, Tornot suggested on the spot, rubbing his hands together expectantly. That'll put some life back into him, and he'll forget everything he's experienced. A stunner like her would be perfect for trauma recovery in bipolar borderline cases, and should be available on prescription. He. Tornot, no sexism, and it's completely out of the question that I would expose Lura to such danger. Decker rejected the suggestion indignantly. But I trust Dr. Watson can get him to talk without any trouble. He's only a military doctor, not a psychiatrist, Dr. Z clarified, finding the survivor rather unsettling. I cannot precisely define what bothers me about the patient, perhaps only that I took an instant dislike to him, but he has such a forbidding look in his eyes that makes me uneasy. Take him to the isolated sick bay, ordered Decker, and ask Dr. Watson to speak to him gently. I have a feeling our military doctor is exactly the right person for him. As you wish, said Dr. Z curtly and visibly affronted, left the bridge again and muttered, and to me of all people. And so the patient sat on a comfortable chair in the middle of the aforementioned sick bay, wearing a pyjama-like beige suit that Esculap I had managed to put on him. A chair was also ready for Dr. Watson, which he was rather reluctant to take. He watched his new patient suspiciously, pacing back and forth in front of him, but the patient's pupils did not follow him. The man with harsh features and a prominent nose sat there impassively, staring into nothingness. His striking profile appeared as if chiselled. His expression seemed slightly contemptuous to the doctor, though that could have been mere imagination. Dr. Watson's first impression was, "Good Lord, this will be a tough nut to crack." The patient did not appear to be in any mood to provide information about himself and his previous activities. Rather, he seemed like hunted prey that had been cornered. Wordlessly, Dr. Watson sat down in the chair opposite and pondered how to proceed. The distance between them was 1.5 meters. Not certain whether he had been sedated, the doctor extended his hand towards him and waved it briefly in front of his eyes, so that in case of blindness he would have felt the slight current of air. No reaction, no blinking, no twitching, nothing. So he leaned back and tried to relax whilst attempting to initiate a casual conversation. "I am very sorry for what has happened to you, my poor friend," he said, observing the patient attentively, who still showed no reaction to him, displaying only frozen facial expressions, his gaze passing straight through the doctor. But better he remains calm, thought he nervously, than if he were to pounce on me and… Suddenly he heard a quiet grinding sound. Was that his teeth? Externally, one could not detect any movement of his jaws that would lead to the noisy grinding of the chewing surfaces. "Do you suffer from bruxism?" asked Dr. Watson sympathetically. No response, though the grinding ceased. At approximately 30 years of age, the man before him was at the peak of his physical fitness, his hands resting loosely on his thighs, and for a moment the doctor thought he resembled a statue or a robot. No blinking, no rising of the chest, no facial expressions, no twitching of the limbs. Therefore, Dr. Watson decided to provoke him. "One could hardly describe your mission as crowned with success. Could that have been down to you, sir?" Now his left corner of the mouth twitched slightly. "Aha," thought the doctor. "He does still have something akin to feelings, albeit dormant in his deepest core, but I shall certainly be capable of awakening them. Your pupils appear dilated to me, as if you had seen something that goes far beyond normal human comprehension and cannot be described in words." Once again, the stubborn patient's corner of mouth twitched. "The result is your visible speechlessness and a facial expression marked by a contempt for death," he continued. "Your mission must have been draining for you and emotionally taxing. I know something similar from my military service in Afghanistan." Imperceptibly, the nasolabial folds of the patient drew deeper into his countenance. Exasperated, the doctor left his seat, turning around quickly just before reaching the door, but he could not catch the man in any unexpected reaction. On the bridge, Tornot was already growing impatient. "This is taking far too long. I wonder if something paralysing lurks over there." "Elmer," Decker called out to the robot aboard the Enola Gatwick. "Have you had any success with the files?" "Yes, sir. I have managed to reconstruct the files containing the photographs and ID numbers of all persons aboard, sir," reported Elmer. "The astronaut who was in the ice block is called Nathaniel Brightman, 33 years old at the time his mission began on board, and apparently hasn't aged a day, as far as I can tell from his medical examination that was created last year. He has 2 years of war experience on Mars. Also aboard were Holt Greenwich, 31 years old, according to the photo, the corpse under the table; Walker Densfield, 30 years old, the corpse in the prison; Bart McQueen, 32 years old, the corpse in the bunk; and Jake Vickeroy, whom I haven't found yet." Were there only 5 men aboard? Tornot wondered. Far too few for such a large vessel. "No, there were 10 men in total, but the others died shortly after launch. Would you like to know their names and causes of death, sir?" asked Elmer. "No, store them in your memory. What's primarily important to me is where this Jake Vickeroy is. Best search the entire blasted ship for him straight away," grumbled Decker, who was becoming increasingly uneasy about the situation. Only Holmes had an objection to make. I would be very interested in the circumstances of death of the other 5 men. Did they die of natural causes, or did someone actively assist in their passing, Elmer? After skimming through the relevant reports in the files, replied Elmer, I could see that they were accidents. One died during a spacewalk when his helmet broke, one fell from a ladder and broke his neck, and the other 3 died from food poisoning. How revealing, remarked Holmes. However, food poisoning could also have been deliberately induced by a malicious companion. I found no recorded suspicion of that. All reports concerning these regrettable deaths were signed off by Holt Greenwich in his capacity as captain, reported Elmer. Copy all files, Elmer, the captain ordered him. Very well, sir. The arrival of Dr. Watson on the bridge drew Decker's attention away from the monitor. Has he said anything yet? No, the patient is as mute as a post, the doctor said irritably. He only twitches the corner of his mouth whenever I provoke him. Keep trying, Doctor, Decker encouraged him. You can address him by his name now. He's called Nathaniel Brightman, 33, fought in the war on Mars. His comrades on the Enola Gatwick are nearly all dead, 3 of them clearly murdered, though it's unclear who killed whom. Brightman is naturally under the greatest suspicion, Holmes noted, as he appears to be the sole survivor, unless Elmer finds the missing person, though in this case it could also be that one of those reportedly marked as dead in the files is not actually dead, for someone must have frozen him. That presents itself as a hypothesis, Decker agreed, and then addressed the doctor again. If further provocation yields nothing, then try the gentle approach with promises of rich rewards from the Supreme Fleet Command of the Galactic Union, Dr. Watson. Very good, he expressed his delight. When I call him by his name, he will surely be more approachable, and especially when he hears about the reward. If I may offer you one more piece of advice, Watson, Holmes added benevolently, it would be better not to appear too patronizing. Well, said the former military doctor, looking somewhat piqued. If you advise me to do so, I shall adopt your factual, detached manner for the remainder of the patient consultation. Elementary, my dear Watson, praised the great detective. Hurry back to him, lest he begin to grow bored. On board the Enola Gatwick, Elmer tirelessly tinkered with the computer to extract more information, such as Jake Viceroy's last known whereabouts. Suddenly, a sound from behind prompted him to turn around. Behind him stood a man-sized robot of the old generation, which was still clad in an appealing fiberglass casing. It wore the equipment of an American football player with broad shoulders and the matching helmet. The number 13 was emblazoned on its chest. Apparently, the engineers of that time had enjoyed giving their creations the appearance of an athlete. The robot in the shape of an American football player screeched in a deep voice, "Intruder! Intruder!" This fellow considers Elmer to be an unauthorized intruder, Sherlock Holmes also realized via the screen. Elmer, finish him off, ordered Decker. We don't want to waste time giving lengthy explanations to this pretty toy. However, before Elmer could strike, he received a punch to the head, followed by a body check, and finally a kick to the knee joint. Intruder! Intruder! Screeched the American footballer incessantly. With all his might, Elmer pushed against him, rammed his elbow into the helmet opening, and tried to tear open his chest with his other hand to reach his electronics. Elmer is simply too peaceful, Tornot mocked. We have used him far too rarely in combat operations up until now. He is not meant to fight, but to serve, and you are not meant to criticize, but to motivate, Decker reprimanded him. Go Elmer, Tornot called to him through the loudspeaker. Destroy him! Well, I don't mean to interfere, but wouldn't it be helpful if we found out what that berserker over there is actually called? Holmes suggested. Such old robots were not given names, only numbers, Decker explained to him. Then Tornot had an idea. Number 13, to the penalty box. Indeed, the foreign robot immediately stopped attacking Elmer, who had barely managed to defend himself against it, turned its back on him, and marched away with its head bowed. "What do you say now, sir?" demanded Tornot, not without pride, seeking a word of approval. "Touchdown," Decker praised and urged Elmer on. "Keep going, Elmer. We want to learn everything about this ghost ship. Above all, where this Viceroy is hiding." Meanwhile, Dr. Watson had already returned to the sick room. "I have good news for you, dear Mr. Brightman," he proclaimed in an unctuous tone after sitting down once again opposite the stubborn patient. "The Galactic Union will provide you with a most generous reward if you solve the mystery surrounding your spacecraft's accident." All of a sudden, life returned to Brightman, who now fixed his counterpart with a hate-filled gaze and unleashed a torrent of words in rapid speech. "You're wasting energy on the insane power fantasy of a union that is obsessed with the fixed notion that everything in the world belongs to them. But the union is nothing, not even a fly speck on an old yellowed map." "Oh," said the doctor, surprised. "All of a sudden you can speak, and I am certain that everything you have to say will be of the utmost interest." Brightman directed his pupils back into emptiness. His mouth corners pulled imperceptibly upwards, yet showed no smile, rather a hint of mockery. Now, Dr. Watson's ambition truly took hold, to get this difficult patient to continue speaking. "Please, let me die a bit less stupid than I was born. Or is someone forbidding you from having a civilized conversation with me?" After a full minute of silence, Brightman directed his gaze back into the doctor's eyes, behind which he thought he could detect a glimmer. In the past, people spoke of the evil eye, and this must be exactly what it looked like, he thought. "The Golden One promised the reward, but it does not tempt me." "The Golden One?" Watson repeated, perplexed. "Do you mean the captain?" Brightman continued speaking, and in a very emphatic tone. "Even when wrapped in gold foil, he can only command those who submit to him. His possibilities are as limited as the radius of action of an ant." The doctor's hair stood up on the back of his neck, yet he tried with stoic composure to keep the conversation going with the recalcitrant patient. "It would help with our examination if you could explain how some of your comrades met their death and how you ended up in a block of ice, Mr. Brightman." "I see no reason to talk about what happened to us," Winnie said. "Nobody would believe us." "You speak of us. Who else besides yourself do you mean?" "When we say us, we mean the inner force that drives us," he expressed cryptically and briefly contorted his mouth, so that for a moment he looked like a gargoyle on an ancient fountain. "Ah!" The doctor was lost for words at this statement. Brightman had already turned his intense gaze away from him and was staring blankly into space once again. Having reached his limits, Dr. Watson turned away from him and decided to seek counsel from the captain and Holmes once more. He did not notice how Brightman's pupils followed him on his way out of the sick room. On his way to the bridge, he met Dr. Z, who inquired about his success. "Well, how did it go, dear colleague? Have you managed to crack the stranger yet?" "Unfortunately, he is still resisting unburdening his conscience to me, though it can only be a matter of minutes now," Dr. Watson informed him somewhat optimistically. On the bridge, however, he sounded rather different. "There is something unnatural about this person," Dr. Watson reported to everyone present on the bridge. "That much I can say, for he knew about your gold uniform, Mr. Decker, without having seen you face to face until now." "That means nothing," Decker dismissed. "Every captain of a Galactic Union ship wears such a uniform." "Yes, but only for about 10 years, Tornot interjected. "So if he had been lost with the shipwreck for 25 years, he couldn't have possibly known that." This realization made Decker pensive. "Correct. Yes, I must admit that. Either he left the ship at some point which I cannot imagine, or or something is completely wrong with him, Tornot finished his superior's sentence. If he could expand his mental capacity, then he would have access to our ship's computer, and therefore all data stored there. I cannot imagine that. Then again, I have encountered so much unimaginable during my journey through space. Dr. Watson, the captain requested, keep trying, but increase the pressure on him. The doctor already felt like a human boomerang, being thrown back and forth between the sick bay and the bridge. Back with Brightman, he sat down again. We haven't got all day, Mr. Brightman, Dr. Watson implored him. Talk straight with me. Time has no meaning for me, he replied mysteriously. Oh yes, indeed, the doctor insisted. Time is running away from us. Please finally tell me what happened aboard your ship. What made you so angry that you lost control? You are as stupid as all the others, Brightman hissed through clenched lips. You're asking the wrong questions. Stupid human flesh. Leave me alone. Intimidated, Dr. Watson practically fled from the sick bay and immediately ran back to the bridge, where he breathlessly described the last session to those gathered there. He spoke of human flesh. I am overcome with an eerie suspicion, said Holmes with a mournful expression. Mr. Decker, this leads me to fear the worst. Order Elmer to check the galley. Surely you don't mean... Decker broke off with a hint of disgust. Sherlock Holmes merely nodded meaningfully. Elmer! Called Decker and swallowed hard. Yes, sir, I have just discovered a medical robot, a destroyed colleague of Aesculapius I, reported Elmer. However, it appears as though it destroyed itself. Go to the galley at once and search it thoroughly. We have a suspicion, ordered the captain. Shall I not continue searching for Viceroy? Yes, we assume he was, killed in the galley, Decker indicated to him, still not quite able to fully believe Holmes's assumption. The notion was too horrifying. This bright man was undoubtedly brutalized by his military service, Dr. Watson expressed his suspicion. I shall return to Brightman with you, Holmes announced cautiously. Perhaps between the two of us, we shall finally extract the whole truth from him, to eliminate even the slightest doubts about his guilt. With quick steps, the two old friends made their way to the separate hospital room, but to their great horror, they discovered it was empty. Only 2 chairs stood within, and there was no sign of Brightman. Oh God, he has escaped, exclaimed the doctor, wringing his hands. Who knows what he is up to at this very moment? We shall split up to search the ship, Holmes directed him. You take this deck whilst I shall proceed to the upper deck where the private sector is located. The private sector presented itself in a colour pleasing to the eye, grass green with golden yellow seating that invited one to linger. On an oak table stood a silver bowl with fresh-looking fruit, such as bananas, apples, and appetizing blue grapes, which formed a pretty still life. Just then, Lura, who liked to spend her free time here, took some grapes, which she lazily popped into her pouting mouth. Today, she wore a grey-blue dress with comfortable white slippers. Hello, sweetie! Brightman addressed her and sat down beside her. Feels like aeons since I've seen such a beautiful woman. Who are you? She asked, outraged by this crude attempt at flirting. I am the new one. Oh? She sensed trouble when she noticed his beige uniform was from the medical ward, but she didn't let it show and remained perfectly composed. We haven't been properly introduced yet. I'm Lura. And I am Nathaniel. My friends always called me Nat, and I am also very nice. Do we understand each other? With that, he briefly winked, then fixed her with a hungry gaze, quite as if he wanted to hypnotize her. I've never seen you before. Where have you been all this time? She probed suspiciously whilst helping herself to more grapes from the bowl. Time does not exist. We construct it with our reality, he explained, while staring directly into her eyes, which made her feel a sense of impending danger. If you address me formally one more time, I shall be offended." "It's difficult to be on first-name terms with someone who radiates such, authority," she breathed. "I agree with you there, and thanks to my authority, I can show you things you've never seen before in your life," he tried to impress her. "Oh, which ones, for example?" She flashed her most seductive smile whilst playing with the grapes between her fingers. "A glimpse behind the illusion that you know as the world," he said mysteriously, "which is not worth living in." "Would you like to taste these delicious grapes, Nat?" she practically cooed, extending a handful invitingly towards him. "Gladly, Laura," he whispered, and devoured the grapes from her hand, already wanting to move closer to her. Sherlock Holmes could see this with dismay as he stepped out of the lift. He immediately tore a fire extinguisher from the wall and shouted loudly, "Fire! It's burning!" "Oh!" Laura exclaimed, jumped up and ran away. "Cough, cough!" Brightman choked on the grapes and wanted to jump up as well. But Holmes managed to spray the fire extinguisher foam into his face, temporarily blinding him and causing him to flail his arms wildly about. Sherlock Holmes skillfully dodged his movements. Meanwhile, the frightened Laura had raised the alarm and sent an emergency call to the bridge using a touchpad next to the lift. "Alarm! An intruder is in the private sector." "I'm coming straight away," Tornot assured her, and hurried into the lift to come to her aid. Upon arriving at the scene, he could already see that Holmes was restraining the escaped Brightman and assisted him in returning him to the sick room. "Well, well," sneered Tornot, who was binding Brightman to the chair with cable ties. "Someone apparently wanted to seize command of the ship." "You poor little sausage," he scolded and spat some chewed grapes in his face. "You're not just a pathetic bacterial creature completely dependent on the entire crew. You also lack the potential to climb up the hierarchy. That uniform won't help you either. You would never have subdued me on your own." "I'm surprised you haven't lost your teeth yet," Tornot hissed, and took a vaccination gun from a niche in the wall. "I can regrow my teeth," Brightman boasted, and bared them demonstratively. Without responding to that, Tornot placed the vaccination gun against his neck and pulled the trigger, followed by a soft click. "That was a chip with which we can track your location in case you manage to escape again, though I cannot imagine that happening." "You haven't understood anything, absolutely nothing," Brightman snapped. "But you'll be quite astonished soon enough, you civilizational throwbacks made flesh. Ha ha ha." He had a veritable fit of laughter. He laughed and laughed. Indeed, he simply couldn't stop laughing. Holmes and Tornot exchanged questioning glances, both getting goosebumps from the prisoner's mad laughter. "Ah, the galley is barricaded," Elmer informed the captain meanwhile. "It even looks as though someone has welded it shut. Most peculiar." "Not if one has something to hide in there," remarked Decker. "Get started on breaking in forcefully. You need not worry about the inventory, as the ship is nothing but a wreck anyway." Attracted by the laughter, Laura entered the sick bay, and Brightman fell silent, staring at her with lustful eyes. "What's the story with this strange person?" she inquired. "He claimed the world was merely an illusion, behind which he could grant me a glimpse." "Come along, Lady Laura," Holmes whispered to her. "This fellow must have glimpsed into God's abyss, although I'm beginning to doubt whether he is even human." "What else could he be?" she trilled. "A cyborg?" "No, rather an emissary from hell, as will soon become apparent if my suspicion proves correct," Holmes muttered. "Forget about him, Laura," Tornot implored her. "You shouldn't waste your thoughts on such a washed-up astronaut who, along with his vessel, was lost for a quarter of a century. How about we go to Daphlon's dance event this evening? He's built an antique discotheque in his laboratory, where colourful wisps of smoke emerge from countless channels and a strobe light scatters Bengal lights." "Only if Sherlock Holmes comes along as well," she demurred. "Absolutely," he agreed immediately. "I would never deny such a charming lady's request." Disappointment spread across Tornot's face. "Well, then we shall go as a threesome. It will be quite fun. However, we must now report to the bridge to deliver our account." "See you later then." Lura waved to them and bounced away excitedly. "That doll has such a sunny disposition. The solar flares are practically shining out of her shapely behind," joked Tornot, who still had Brightman's insults lingering in the back of his mind. "Really, Mr. Tornot," Holmes reprimanded him with a stern look, "you ought to communicate with and about ladies in a more refined manner. Then perhaps one of your attempts at courtship might actually succeed." The first officer wanted to respond to that, but Dr. Watson approached him to return to his patient, so he decided to remain silent to avoid further friction. "I actually found Jake Viceroy in the galley," Elmer reported to the captain at the same time. "At least parts of him. His severed head is in the refrigerator, and a hand is floating in a pot sitting on the induction hob." "We must secure evidence," Decker determined. "Bring the hand over to us in a sealed container straight away, Elmer. Dr. Z shall examine it and compare the DNA with Viceroy's file stored in the ship's computer, which you have already copied." "Very well, sir." Shortly afterwards, Tornot and Holmes returned to the bridge and informed Decker about Brightman's statements. "This repulsive individual speaks in riddles, sir," Tornot said indignantly. "Called me a bacterial creature and laughed his arse off. Pardon me, he had a fit of laughter." "The fellow is far more dangerous than he appears," Decker growled. "Good old Watson continues to look after him," Holmes reassured him. "May I inquire about the state of affairs, Mr. Decker?" "It is all but certain. Viceroy presumably became a cannibal's dinner," the captain informed them dejectedly. "Elmer is bringing a remnant of him aboard for thorough DNA analysis." "This confirms my suspicion," Holmes stated. "Brightman committed all the murders." "But who froze Brightman then, if he killed Viceroy beforehand?" Tornot wondered. "The medical robot," Holmes replied spontaneously. "Brightman ordered it to freeze him first and gave it a second command for self-destruction, and the dutiful robot properly carried out one order after the other." "Brilliant!" Decker gave the great detective well-deserved praise. "That's that then," said Tornot, casually folding his arms across his chest. "Another case solved, eh, Mr. Holmes?" Not quite. We still need to discover why this spacecraft placed itself in our path," remarked the detective. "Well, that pompous Brightman needed new victims," assessed the first officer. "But he failed to send any of us into the afterlife." "Mr. Decker, you mentioned that the ghost ship was positioned directly in front of a quantum tunnel," Holmes recalled, still considering the case unresolved. "Could it be that these tunnels are also, how should I put it, clogged?" "No, there isn't a clogged tunnel, but rather a distorted one," explained the captain. "In the worst case, such a quantum tunnel can lead directly to a black hole, which is very dangerous because one can be pulled in, never to be seen again. But that's merely grey theory, as it has never happened before." "Sir, that would explain Brightman's lack of aging," Tornot interjected again, dropping his arms. "If he had found the point where he could orbit the black hole in the right way and at the exact distance from the event horizon, so that he would effectively fall out of time, then he would be immortal." No sooner had the first officer finished speaking than all the portholes of the Enola Gatewick lit up like spotlights. "That's not a ghost ship, that's a prototype vessel," Decker realised. "Quickly, we must get away from here. Full reverse thrust." "Full reverse thrust!" Tornot repeated the command, and the Ultimo One backed away at a breathtaking pace. Fortunately, the self-activating force field on board prevented the crew from being knocked over like a row of skittles. Decker's fingers cramped into the armrests of his command chair. Through the front window, they could see the Enola Gatewick becoming smaller and smaller until it had almost shrunk to a tiny dot. "It may be the wrong moment to learn what a prototype vessel is," Holmes interjected. I only know it from literature, so I suspect it's something sinister. While the engines of the Ultimo 1 had shifted into reverse at full throttle, Decker agreed with a disgusted expression. Oh yes, such a ship exists solely to lure another to its doom, for reasons completely incomprehensible to normally functioning brains. Until now, this remained merely grey theory and only a topic in emergency training. If we don't withdraw quickly, and, more importantly, far enough, it will drag us with it into the quantum tunnel straight into the black hole, whilst it can merely orbit around it, a trap for eternity. At that precise moment, the Ultimo 1 stopped and an atonal sound rang out, sounding rather like metal scraping against metal. Then it began moving forwards, at first slowly, then increasingly faster, so that the Enola gatewick grew from a dot back to the size of an orange. Double reverse thrust, Decker ordered nervously. Double reverse thrust, repeated Tornot, and the ship trembled. The vibration spread throughout the entire crew, whose bodies began to shake. At least the Erlkönig remained visible before them at the same size, which meant they had reached a stalemate. Finally, the Enola gatewick dematerialized before their eyes. The fateful ship simply vanished. System shutdown, ordered Decker. However, the computer had already cut off the power supply due to overload, and it went dark. The emergency lighting switched on and bathed the bridge in an eerie light. The captain rose from his command chair. My training for such an outrageous situation was quite some time ago. I almost wouldn't have thought of something like this. I was too distracted with the reconnaissance matter. I'm curious what this Brightman will say when he learns his ship has sailed off without him, said the captain, jumping up and rushing to the lift. Holmes followed him and travelled with him to the infirmary. From the infirmary, an agitated Dr. Watson came running towards them. Can you believe it? The patient simply vanished into thin air right before my eyes. It's absolutely incredible. Incredible, but true. His ship has already performed the same feat before our very eyes, Holmes explained. That means Brightman was quantum mechanically connected to his ship and has certainly already swung back into orbit around the black hole at this moment. Decker assessed upon entering the sick room, where on one chair lay the chip that Tornot had implanted in the neck of Brightman, who had already fled before. This experience will be etched into my memory like a scar, that's for certain. But why did he kill his fellow crew members on board? The doctor asked, unable to comprehend. That's quite obvious, my friend, replied Holmes with a raised eyebrow, because he had simply lost his mind, and now a black hole has become his destiny. Indeed it is, and by the skin of our teeth we have just managed to escape our fate once more, Decker noted with visible relief. Because you, dear Mr. Holmes, asked the right question at the right time. Yes, Holmes nodded contentedly. Sometimes one can bring a difficult case to a satisfactory conclusion with a simple question. You were listening to Pomej. The Ghost Ship. Sherlock Holmes, The Galactic Cases. Episode 14. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Go Audio production.